Autumn of 732 spreads like a shadow over Gaul. And from the south, the crescent rides on a tide of iron and dust. The Umayyad Caliphate, victorious from the Atlas to the Pyrenees, pushes north with the certainty of sunrise. Banners snapping like whip cracks against a cold sky. Monasteries fall silent. Towns empty before hooves. And the old Roman roads carry rumor faster than couriers. Nothing has stopped these riders. History tightens its grip, as if the continent itself is drawing breath and holding it. Against that momentum stands a man without a crown and without illusions, Charles, called Martel, the Hammer. He gathers not knights glittering in pageant, but hard-handed levies in patched mail and leather, drilled until silence becomes a weapon and a shield wall, a creed. Beyond them, Abdul Rahman's cavalry gleams and flows, a living river of lances and curved steel. War taught to run like wind and strike like lightning, between speed and stance, between glitter and grit. The road narrows toward a single field where Europe's future will be measured in heartbeats and held, if at all, by men who refuse to move. Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi rides at the point of an army tempered by fire, the man who broke Visigothic Spain and drove his banners to the edge of the world. Veterans cluster beneath him in tight echelons, Arab and Berber nobles beside hardened Ghazis, answering to clear signals and a chain of command that moves like a blade. Orders pass by pennant and horn, and the column flexes on cue, as if the whole host shares a single set of reins. It is a cavalry mind, confident, practiced, and hungry for distance. Their kit is built for speed in shock lamellar and mail over quilted coats. Oval shields slung high. Lances couched for the first crash. Curved blades ride at the hip. Spare javelins balance in the fist. And leather creaks over the deep lungs of Barb and Arabian horses. Scouts rake the horizons, mapping fords and rises, while advance guards peel off to cut roads and seize grain. When the standards lean, the charge is not a shout but a precision. Hooves drumming like an argument the earth cannot refuse. Gaul learns their doctrine by its scars, charred doors where churches stood, markets stripped to emptiness, and long roads lined with people walking west without speaking. Bells go silent. Even the crows seem to hold their breath over towns that wake to ash. Fear does the work of 1,000 lances, running ahead of the vanguard to open gates and empty fields. And yet the march does not slow. The momentum gathers toward Tours, toward a rumor of a man called the Hammer and a wall that will not step aside. Dust lifts in sheets behind the columns, banners cutting the wind as if drawing a line across a map. The horses sweat, the iron sings, and the horizon tightens into one narrow place. There, speed will meet silence, and only one will move. He gathers them from fields and cloisters, from river fords and forest edges, farmers with rope-scarred hands, monks with ink-stained fingers, freemen with winter in their eyes. Under a gray sky, they learn the same language step. Lock, breathe. Charles Martel makes silence their drill master and pressure their tutor, turning clumsy grips into measured holds, loose lines into a living seam of wood and iron. By nightfall, calloused palms know the weight of spear shafts as if they were plow handles reborn. He studies the land the way others study scripture. Not the open plain, never the gallop's playground, but ground that interrupts speed-patchy woods that bite into flanks, low rises that break a horse's line of sight, furrows that catch a hoof and punish momentum. He chooses a ridge near Tours, where the soil is firm underfoot and sight lines narrow like a funnel. The plan is not to meet force with flourish, but to let distance collapse into discipline. The grind begins, wagons creak in low profile behind the line, barrels of grain and water tucked in folds of earth, spare spears stacked like kindling under oiled cloth. Men bind leather straps until they squeak, check boss to boss until shields kiss, and whisper prayers that sit heavy but calm. Small trenches are cut where the line will root. Saplings felled to clutter the approaches. and markers set in the turf so every boot knows exactly where it belongs. No drums call courage here. Courage arrives in measured breaths. Word moves ahead of hooves that the riders are near, and the men learn to wait without wasting the waiting. Captains pace the ranks with quiet eyes, swapping the young to the second file, the stubborn to the front, the steady to the places that will take the brunt. Martel walks the ridge and says little, his finger mapping the line that must not bend, the depth that must not thin, the place where speed will drown. The wind leans colder from the south. The crows lift, and the human wall locks shields as a dust smudge on the horizon becomes an army. Morning frost rims the Loire's reed beds, and the river runs like dull steel beneath a sky the color of ash. The land rises in shallow swells toward a narrow ridge, its shoulders trimmed with oak and thorn that choke the flanks. Wind moves across the grass in low, cold sheets, carrying the taste of iron and wet leaves. And the light is thin enough to make distance lie. Martel's ground is chosen by angles, not romance. The ridge crowns with firm loam, neither slick nor rutted, and the approaches pinch into lanes where a horse must straighten or slow. On either side, the woods lean in like closing doors, while to the rear, a shallow fall of earth hides wagons and reserves from a charging eye. The field itself feels taut, as if strung between trees and sky. The Frankish array grows out of that tension-dense ranks, stacked in depth, a rectangle with beveled edges to deny the sweep of a flank. Shields overlap until they drum as one body when the wind knocks them. Bosses kissing, rims tucked, leather creaking as straps are cinched. Spears angle forward and slightly down, set to bite shins and chests rather than glance. And the second and third files breathe in cadence, counting the steps they will feed into the first. Captains pace the intervals, measuring gaps with fingers, eyes, and habit. Beyond the ridge, the horizon gathers a stain of dust that thickens into forms, pennants, and the glint of moving metal. Sound travels first as rumor, then as rhythm, hooves striking the far ground in a pulse that agrees with no heart but its own. Faces set, teeth show white in cold mouths, and frost ghosts each breath behind the shield line. The human wall bends its knees a fraction, heels digging for purchase, as the thunder grows loud enough to shake the air. The sound arrives before the riders do a distant tremor that unthreads the morning and climbs the ridge like a drum inside the ribs. Dust rolls in sheets, parting to reveal wedges of horse and iron, banners snapping with the violence of speed. Horns answer horns, and the column lengthens into needles of intent. Lances rising, dipping, aligning to a geometry that wants to punch a hole through the world. The wind itself seems to lean with them. Acceleration becomes a creature. Knees press, hips sink, and the horses lengthen their stride until the ground blurs beneath them. Pennants lash, hooves bite, and wedges bevel inward. Point first, angling for joints in doubt. The front rank lowers lances in a glittering rake. A single, hard intention aimed at quiet faces and still shields. The Frankish line answers with stillness. Heels grind into loam, toes turn a fraction in. Shield rims cant forward to make a ramp for glancing blows. Spearheads tilt down and out like thorns. The second rank braced with hips set and breath held on account. Captain's hands pass along the front like brief weather, tapping shoulders, closing gaps, pinning the silence into place. Impact arrives as a layered noise, iron on wood, wood on bone, hooves on shields, and the breath torn out of 100 chests at once. Lances strike and skid, tips sliding along beveled rims to spark harmlessly into air, while others bury shallow and bind until hands let go on command. The wall absorbs the charge in inches, knees flexing, shoulders locking. The second rank stepping in a half pace to give weight to the first. Spears answer, not with flourish, but with short, mean thrusts that punish overreach and then return to the lattice. The wedge chews and stalls. Horses, denied space. Bunch and climb. Riders lean to find angles that no longer exist. Along the rectangle's edge, files compress and then breathe open again, like a set of lungs that refuses to panic. A fallen shield is replaced by the man behind it in the blink between hoofbeats, the hole sealed before it can earn a name. Momentum drains into the formation and vanishes, turned into ache and steam. Leather straps sing under strain. Bosses ring like struck bells, and the first wave peels away. Not defeated so much as denied. The ground between lines turns white with breath, loud with groans and the soft thunder of retreating hooves. In that brief, terrible pocket of quiet, drums speak again from the far dust, and the human wall lifts its shields, resets its feet, and waits for the next argument. Silence tightens over the ridge, broken only by the hiss of breath and the soft knock of shields settling back into place. Frost lifts in small ghosts from men and horses alike. The air tasting of leather and iron, far off. Horns trade short, hard phrases. The line exhales once, as if testing whether the lungs still belong to it. The second surge comes heavier. A darker seam in the dust. The beat of hooves punching a deeper hole in the morning. Pennant's knife forward, wedges thicken. The sound rolls up the slope like a drum turned sideways. Men dip knees. Heels find purchase. And the rectangle knits tighter without a word. When the front rank sets, the world seems to lean toward it. Impact dents the wall. Not evenly, but in bright. Hot dents, where lances find rims and angles try to cheat the geometry. Shields tremble. Edges jump. And the first file absorbs the weight through hips and spine. Officers' voices arrive as flint short. Exact lock. Step. Close and reserves flow into gaps as if the ground itself had opened and provided them. The line, warped, redraws itself in the time between two hoofbeats. Martel's signals ride the formation like whether a raised fist. A turned wrist. A still hand that means hold until the count is true. Front ranks rotate on command. One man back. One man forward. A hinge that moves in inches and keeps the edge fresh. Broken spears vanish. New shafts slide into waiting hands. The lattice restoring itself with the familiarity of breath. Silence remains the grammar. Obedience. The voice. A third push arrives almost on the second's heels. Angrier. Closer. The cadence offbeat to confuse timing. The wedge bites deeper. Horses skittering against rims that lift and can't to cut angles. And for one long breath, the rectangle bows. Teeth flash in cold mouths. A few shields drop and are replaced. And the second rank steps into the weight like a door slamming against wind. The bow straightens. Between surges, the field steams. A white veil over trampled grass and churned loam. Drums from the far side speak in clipped syllables. On the ridge. Only the ring of iron answers. Men flex numb fingers inside straps. Shift weight from foot to foot. And find the count again. The rectangle shortens its front a hand's breadth and deepens its heart. Another wave gathers and veers. Scouts curl along the wooded edges and fall away like swifts. The cavalry circles, testing flanks that present beveled corners instead of open doors. In the ranks, the rhythm becomes a metronome hoof. Ring. Breath. Lock repeated until fear has no room to live. The wall does not harden so much as cool. Colder and tighter than before. When the hooves finally ease, the quiet is heavy enough to bend branches. Steam drifts. Banners hung exhausted. And the gap between lines holds its own wary breath. Officers listen to the ground with the soles of their feet. Then pass the only order the men need. Stand. Somewhere beyond the dust. Drums begin again. And the human wall lowers its shields, a finger's span, and waits. A hush hangs between horns. Abdul Rahman studies the ridge. then lifts his hand and sets his guard in motion. Picked riders. Bright mail. Lances trimmed like needles for a single wound. Across the slope, Martel answers with nothing but stillness and a glance to his right, where shadows pool behind the ridge and a quiet column waits for one sign. Drums from the far side speak in clipped syllables. On the ridge, only the ring of iron answers. Men flex numb fingers inside straps, shift weight from foot to foot, and find the count again. The rectangle shortens its front a hand's breadth and deepens its heart. Another wave gathers and veers. Scouts curl along the wooded edges and fall away like swifts. The cavalry circles, testing flanks that present beveled corners instead of open doors. Fabric snaps. A banner dips, and both leaders commit. The guard's charge strikes like a blade drawn, clean wedges nested inside wedges. Hooves cutting a straight seam for the rectangle's heart. Shields cant and bite. Ranks flex and hold. And the human wall surrenders 2 steps of ground to steal the charge's breath. In the instant, the lances bind. Martel's reserve pours off the blind side of the ridge foot and a little horse cutting for the Umayyad camp and the throat of its noise. The attack becomes 2 halves that cannot hear each other. Abdul Rahman rides the seam between panic and purpose. Reins tight, voice steady, rallying to the loudest void where signals should be and are not. He gathers a knot of guards and drives to rejoin his forward lances. But the ground has changed shape. The rectangle has turned its edges like a gate. A ring of still shields rises where a gap seemed to be. The riders bunch, and the commander is swallowed by nearness. When the shields drop, the voice that bound momentum to will is gone. What follows is not a rout at first, but a melting formation sloughing into streams. Streams into eddies. Eddies into flight as the light thins toward evening. The reserve holds the camp's edge like a nail through leather. The wall advances a measured pace. Then another, pushing a silence into the spaces where drums used to live. By dusk, banners lower on both sides, but only one line still owns the ground beneath its heels. Night gathers its cold over a field kept by men who did not move. Dawn unbuttons the night with a thin, colorless light, and the field reveals itself without kindness. Horses lie in tangled heaps, steam still lifting from their flanks where breath outlived command. And broken lances stand like a forest that forgot how to be trees. Banners that hunted wind yesterday hang in the frost, their cloth stiff as bark, their emblems muddied to silence. The Frankish line still stands where the dark left it. Shields touching, points angled, eyes raw with sleepless grit. No cheer cuts the cold, only the quiet rasp of leather and the small clicks of teeth against chattering breath. Captains pace with measured feet, as if noise might wake what the night has sent away. Scouts slip from the flanks into the gray, moving along the ruts where hooves once spoke in thunder. They thread past overturned cauldrons and torn ropes, over coals gone black, through a camp abandoned in haste and doubt. When they return, they bring the simplest word a soldier can carry gone, and it lands with the weight of a church bell. The line does not break so much as loosen, grips easing, shields lowering the width of a finger. Men roll stiff shoulders, wipe iron with the hems of their tunics, and forget to blink until the sting forces tears they cannot name. A few sit without permission and find that the ground takes them without question. Crows arrive late, black scribbles against a washed-out sky, and their voices sketch the verdict. The living hesitate to speak. Frost rims the spear shafts like salt, and the breath of the survivors floats in tattered streamers over a silence earned 1 inch at a time. The human wall held, and in holding, it outlived the storm. There are no speeches, only hands that remember how to pray without words and feet that refuse to move before their turn. The sun climbs a hand's breadth, indifferent and exact, and the ridge keeps its promise under them. Survival is the measure, and it is enough for now. The verdict of Tours was not written in glory but in geometry, discipline defeating velocity, silence outlasting sound. On that ridge beside the Loire, A line of men proved that unity, not splendor, decides survival. The human wall turned the weapon of empire speed into its weakness, forcing momentum to break upon patience and order. What began as defense became revelation that a civilization could be protected by stillness. The Umayyad advance stopped not with banners torn, but with will denied. The riders withdrew south across the Pyrenees, their chain of conquest finally broken, their momentum spent against men who did not chase. In their wake, the Frankish heartland held fast. No longer a scattering of tribes, but a body that had felt itself stand as one. Charles Martel's name, once a warning, now a foundation, became the hinge upon which a new order began to turn. From that cohesion grew the Carolingian arc armies trained to hold, states bound by discipline, and a lineage that would crown Charlemagne, the first emperor of a reunited West. The logic of Tours' depth, terrain, patience became the grammar of medieval war. The way fortresses would rise, and infantry would learn to outlast the charge. 1,000 campaigns later, its lesson would echo through mud and armor. The wall, not the whirlwind, endures. But beyond tactics and kings, Tours wrote something quieter into memory. It taught that a continent can be born not through conquest, but through refusal, the courage to stay when the world demands retreat. That day, Europe learned its pulse, slow and deliberate, forged in the breath between hoofbeats. And though centuries would bury the names beneath crowns and myths, the rhythm would remain the shield locking to its neighbor. The ground chosen, the line that holds in that stubborn heartbeat, cold and steady as the dawn, Europe began.